problems with him. I always, we got along very well. I had a great deal of respect for him. He likewise for me, I think.
Yes, he said that.
And I'm glad that he did come back with us. I don't know. I didn't say anything to him. I don't have any, any grudges against him.
We were best friends for a long time. It started in '93 when I was on a mission and dominating, and the Phillies were dominating. I got a note in the clubhouse from saying Charlie Sheen wanted to meet me. So I went and actually, there's a good chapter in the book about it, and I talk about.
You see Lenny Dykstra on the left side of that split screen and Reggie Jackson on the right, and the question that sits in white text right between them is absolutely brutal. Reggie was horrible. That is the claim. That is what millions of baseball fans believe when they look back at his career and stack it up against the true immortals of the game. Reggie Jackson is the all-time strikeout king with 2,597 whiffs. He hit just .262 for his entire career. He made 142 errors in the outfield. He fought his own teammates. He divided clubhouses. He was a one-tool player in an age that demands five-tool excellence. When you compare him to the real legends, the comparison falls apart completely. His Hall of Fame induction in 1993 felt controversial to many baseball purists. They argued he did not belong in that shrine. They said his numbers were hollow. They said his fame was built on moments, not excellence. And if you want to give this video a little extra push while we dig into the wild Reggie story, tap the hype feature and give it some hype. Here's the thing though. Yes, all of that is true, but the story is way more interesting than just saying Reggie was trash. Because a flawed player who struck out constantly and could not field still somehow became one of the most famous names in baseball history. The real question is not whether his flaws were real. They absolutely were. The real question is, why does a player with so many problems become so legendary? That is the paradox we are actually exploring today. It is the paradox that defines sports history. It is the paradox that shows us that talent and fame are not always the same thing. Let me set the measuring stick first. When we talk about the true immortals of baseball, we are talking about a very specific tier. These are not Hall of Famers. These are not good players. These are the Titans. These are the absolute gods of the sport. Babe Ruth is in there. Willie Mays is in there. Hank Aaron is in there. Ted Williams is in there. Lou Gehrig is in there. Ty Cobb is in there. These 6 names represent the peak of what baseball perfection looks like. And Reggie Jackson asked us to compare him to these 6. He claimed a place at the table. And when we actually do that comparison, things get really ugly really fast. Let us start with number 5, and that is Ty Cobb. Ty Cobb hit 366 for his career. He got 4,189 hits. He stole nearly 900 bases. His entire game was built on pressure. He would bunt. He would steal. He would run the bases with intelligence and aggression. When Ty Cobb came to bat, the defense had to think. They had to prepare. They had to execute. Every single pitch was a chess match. Cobb understood the game at an intellectual level. Reggie Jackson played the opposite way. His game was the 3 true outcomes: home run, walk, or strikeout. And strikeout was way too common. When Reggie Jackson struck out, the opposing pitcher did not have to make a play. The defense did not have to get ready. Reggie basically bailed them out. He took pressure off instead of putting it on. Cobb understood that putting the ball in play forces mistakes. He understood that errors happen when the ball is in motion. Jackson understood that swinging as hard as possible sometimes looks cool on television. That is the fundamental clash between these two philosophies. Cobb was a technician who mastered every aspect of the game. Jackson was a brute who relied on raw power. Cobb would figure out what a pitcher wanted to throw and then not swing at it. Jackson would swing at everything. Cobb would manufacture runs with small ball and intelligent base running. Jackson would wait for his moment to hit one out or strike out trying. These are completely different approaches to baseball. Number 4 is Lou Gehrig, the Iron Horse. Gehrig drove in 1,995 runs in just 17 seasons. He averaged nearly 150 runs batted in every single 162 game season. Jackson drove in 1,702 runs over 21 seasons. That means Gehrig did it in 4 fewer years and did it more efficiently. Gehrig was also a leader. He played 2,130 consecutive games. He played through pain. He played through illness. He showed up. He led by example. Jackson was frequently benched. He was frequently injured. He was frequently embroiled in drama that kept him out of the lineup. But here's the real difference. Gehrig united the Yankees. Every player who played alongside him wanted to play for him. Jackson divided the Yankees. His teammates isolated him. His manager had to physically restrain himself from attacking Jackson on national television. That is not just a statistics thing. That is a character thing. That is a leadership thing. Gehrig lifted his team. Jackson weighed his team down. Number 3 is Ted Williams. Ted Williams is widely considered the greatest pure hitter who ever lived. His career on-base percentage was .482. Think about that. That means Ted Williams got on base almost 1 out of every 2 times he came to the plate. He reached base nearly 50% of the time. Reggie Jackson reached base roughly 1/3 of the time. His on-base percentage was .356. Williams treated hitting like a science. He divided the strike zone into 77 different cells and understood the probability of success on each pitch in each location. He understood exactly which pitches to swing at and which to avoid. He would walk 150 times a season. Jackson treated hitting like a brute force exercise. He swung hard and hoped for the best. He had no real philosophy. He just wanted to hit it hard. Williams led the league in home runs and in walks simultaneously. That shows you the kind of discipline he had. He did not sacrifice contact for power. He did not sacrifice walks for power. He had it all. Jackson sacrificed literally everything for power and still hit 151 fewer home runs than Ruth. Williams mastered the art of not making outs. Jackson was the king of the unproductive out. When you made an out in baseball, strikeout was the worst possible out you could make. It advances no runners. It forces no defensive errors. It puts zero pressure on the field. Jackson held the all-time record for strikeouts with 2,597. In plain English, that means for nearly 5 full seasons worth of at-bats, Jackson did not put the ball in play. He just failed. He just swung and missed. Williams almost never struck out relative to his walk rate because he was disciplined and smart. Jackson struck out because he was undisciplined and loose. Number 2 is Hank Aaron. Hank Aaron is consistency personified. He never hit 50 home runs in a single season, not once in his entire career. But he hit 755 home runs over his career, more than anyone else ever has besides Barry Bonds. He hit over 314 different seasons. He was a metronome. You could predict his output season to season. He would get you 40 home runs and a 300 average almost every year. Jackson was a streak hitter. He would carry a team for 2 weeks and then completely disappear for a month. Aaron struck out only 1,383 times in his entire career. Jackson struck out 2,597 times. That is almost exactly double. Aaron hit more home runs while striking out half as often. How is that even possible? It is possible because Aaron understood the strike zone better. He had bat control. He could put the ball in play. When Aaron swung, he connected. When Jackson swung, he sometimes just missed completely. Aaron also faced immense racial hostility when he was chasing Ruth's home run record. He received death threats. He received hate mail. He received constant pressure from people trying to intimidate him. And Aaron responded with quiet dignity and grace. He did not court controversy. He did not feud with the media. He did not try to create drama. He just played great baseball every single day. Jackson also faced racism in his career, but his response was often to court the camera and create headlines. Aaron is the professional's professional. Jackson is the showman. In terms of actual output over an actual season, Aaron provides significantly more value. Number 1 is Willie Mays. Willie Mays is widely considered the greatest all-around player in baseball history. He could impact a game in 5 different ways. With his bat, with his glove, with his arm, with his legs, with his mind. He won 12 Gold Gloves. He was the greatest defensive center fielder in the history of baseball. He made plays that seemed impossible. He had the ability to track fly balls in ways that defied explanation. He had the arm strength to throw out runners at home plate from deep in center field. He stole 338 bases, and he did it efficiently. His success rate was over 75%. Jackson stole 228 bases, but was caught stealing 115 times. His success rate was just 66%. In sabermetrics, when your success rate drops below 75%, you are hurting your team. You are running yourself out of scoring position. You are taking unnecessary risks. Jackson was flashy but inefficient on the bases. He would make the aggressive play look exciting even when it was a bad decision. Mays was smart and efficient. He would make the right play and you would not always see it because it was not dramatic. Jackson committed 142 errors in right field. That is a less demanding position than center field. He won 0 Gold Gloves. Mays won 12. That is a massive difference. The defensive metrics are called DWAE. Defensive wins above replacement. It measures how many wins you add or subtract with your defense. Mays had plus 18.2 DWAR. That is elite. Jackson had minus 12.0 DWAR. That means he actively hurt his team when he was playing defense. If he hit 30 home runs but gave back 15 runs in the field through errors and poor positioning, his net value was drastically reduced. Mays could win a game with his glove alone. If Mays went 0 for 4 at the plate, he probably saved 2 runs in center field. Jackson went 0 for 4. He likely contributed absolutely nothing to the win. He was bat only. He was a designated hitter forced to play the field. Mays was a complete player. That is the fundamental difference. And then there is Babe Ruth. Babe Ruth is not just the greatest baseball player ever. He is the most dominant athlete in the history of sports. Ruth hit 714 home runs. He hit them in roughly 8,399 at-bats. That means he hit a home run every 11.76 at-bats. Jackson hit 563 home runs in 9,864 at-bats. He hit a home run every 17.5 at-bats. Ruth was approximately 50% more efficient at hitting home runs than Jackson, and Ruth played in an era where the baseball was not as lively and the stadiums were often giant. Ruth also did not sacrifice contact for power. He hit .342 for his career. Jackson sacrificed literally everything for power and still hit 151 fewer home runs than Ruth. Let that sink in. Ruth was more efficient, hit for a better average, and hit more home runs all at the same time. Ruth was also a dominant pitcher before he became a hitter. He won 94 games as a pitcher with a 2.28 earned run average. He was elite at 2 completely different positions at the highest level of baseball. Jackson was elite at essentially one thing: power hitting. That is it. When you look at career WR, which is wins above replacement, a comprehensive stat that measures total value to a team, Ruth's WAR is 182.6. Jackson's WAR is 74.0. Ruth is more than double. You could take Reggie Jackson's entire career, double it, and he would still be less valuable than Babe Ruth. That is the gap. That is the difference between a legend and a true immortal. So yes, when you compare Reggie Jackson to the actual immortals, the comparison is brutal. His strikeout record is brutal. His .262 batting average is brutal. The fact that he never hit 300 in a single full season is brutal. Every single one of those 6 legends hit over 300 for their careers. Jackson is the only one under that mark. He could not do the most basic thing in baseball at an elite level. He could not hit for average. He could not hit for consistency. He struck out constantly. To really understand this, you have to think about what 2,597 strikeouts means in real baseball terms. That is nearly 1 strikeout for every 10 plate appearances. That is roughly 25% of every at-bat ending in a strikeout. In a 162-game season with about 550 plate appearances, Jackson would strike out around 137 times. That is unheard of for an elite player. The Immortals struck out maybe 60 to 80 times a season at most. Jackson was striking out almost twice as much. The all-or-nothing nature of his game meant that if he was not hitting a home run, he was probably making an out. There was no in-between. There was no single or double. There was home run or strikeout. And when you think about the pressure moments in baseball, that is a catastrophic weakness. With runners in scoring position, you need contact. You need to be able to put the ball in play and let your teammates drive you in. Jackson could not do that reliably. He would either hit a home run or strike out looking. There was no way to manufacture runs. There was no way to work a walk and steal a base. There was just raw power or nothing. And then there is the defense. The 142 errors, the stone hands, the poor roots to the ball, the lack of instincts, the defensive liability that actually cost his team wins. When you watch film of Jackson in the field, scouts report that he did not have great instincts. He would sometimes misjudge fly balls. He would sometimes take poor routes to ground balls. He relied on his athleticism to recover rather than on technique and preparation. Advanced metrics prove it. His DWAR was negative. The scouting reports prove it. Contemporary accounts describe him as indifferent in the field. His lack of Gold Glove awards while playing alongside Aaron and Mays proves it. He was not a good defender. He was a bad defender. He was a liability. Every time he made an error, he was hurting his team. Every time he took a bad route, he was costing his team extra outs. Modern baseball has the designated hitter for exactly this reason. Jackson should have been the designated hitter. Instead, he was forced to play right field where his mistakes cost his team wins. The math works like this. If Jackson prevented maybe 10 or 15 wins with his bad defense over his career, but created 100 wins with his home runs, you might think that is a net positive. But when you are compared to Mays, who created 100 wins with his home runs and prevented negative plays with his great defense, suddenly Jackson is way behind. Mays could do everything. Jackson could only hit home runs. Let us talk about the postseason too, because that is his biggest claim to fame. He is Mr. October. He is the guy who shows up in the World Series when the stakes are highest. That is his entire reputation. That is the foundation of his legend. But here's the problem. The stats do not back it up the way people think. In the World Series, yes, he crushed it. He hit .357 with 10 home runs in 27 games. That is elite stuff. That is genuinely impressive. That is the kind of performance that gets remembered forever by millions of people watching at home. But in the League Championship Series, the rounds that lead you to the World Series, he hit .227 with 6 home runs in 45 games. That is a dramatic drop-off. That is pedestrian hitting. That is below average production. That is a massive gap between his World Series performance and his ALCS performance. That means his team often had to carry him through the first rounds so he could show up and perform in the final stage. That is not a true carrier of a team. That is not a true leader. A real genius player dominates all phases of the postseason. Ruth did it. Mays did it. Aaron did it. Jackson, he peaked in the most televised moments. He peaked when the cameras were hot. He peaked when millions of people were watching. That is just variance. That is just statistical variance. That is just getting lucky at the right time. Sabermetric research shows that clutchability is not a repeatable skill from year to year. It is mostly random and unpredictable. Jackson happened to peak when millions of people were watching on television. That is not a special attribute. That is not a repeatable skill. That is luck. That is variance. Let us also talk about the A's years. People say Jackson was the foundation of those teams that won 3 straight World Series in 1972, 1973, and 1974. But Jackson missed the entire 1972 World Series due to injury, and the A's won anyway. That tells you everything you need to know about his actual importance. That team could win without him. That team was built on dominant pitching with Catfish Hunter and Vita Blue. That team was built on solid defense. That team had chemistry and leadership that did not depend on Reggie Jackson. Jackson was not the foundation. He was an addition. He was a bonus. He was the extra power hitter on a team that did not need him to win. Same thing with the Yankees in 1977 and 1978. Those teams featured the best defense in baseball, with Greg Nettles making impossible plays every night. Those teams had Cy Young caliber pitching with Ron Guidry winning 25 games. The pitching was elite. The defense was elite. Jackson was the cherry on top. He was not the foundation. He was not the carrier. He was not the reason those teams won. He was riding great teams at great times. He was a luxury player on championship teams that were already built to win. That is a huge difference from being like Ruth or Gehrig, who carried their teams through sheer force of will. And then there is the clubhouse element. This is where the criticism really sticks. In a 1977 interview with Sport magazine, Jackson said something that absolutely destroyed his relationship with his teammates. He said he was the straw that stirs the drink. He said Thurman Munson, his own team captain, and the reigning MVP could only stir it bad. He said this before playing a meaningful game with the Yankees. He walked into a winning clubhouse that already had chemistry and leadership and immediately created division. He isolated himself. He made himself the outsider. That is not leadership. That is ego. That is arrogance at the highest level. Munson was beloved by his teammates. Jackson was a newcomer declaring himself superior to the team captain. The division that created lasted his entire time there. His teammates did not trust him. They did not like him. They tolerated him because he could hit home runs, but they did not respect him the way they respected Aaron or Gehrig or Ruth. That is a massive difference. Jackson also got into physical altercations with his own teammates. These were not small disagreements. These were full-on fights. He fought Billy North in the Oakland Clubhouse in 1974. Billy North was his center fielder. These were supposed to be teammates working together toward a common goal. But Jackson's volatility created tension. The fight was so severe that catcher Ray Fosse, trying to break it up and do the right thing, suffered a crushed disc in his neck that effectively ended his career. Ray Fosse was a good player. He was trying to help, and Jackson's violence injured him permanently. That is the impact of Jackson's behavior. It did not just affect Jackson, it damaged his teammates. Then in 1977 with the Yankees, manager Billy Martin pulled Jackson for lack of hustle on a shallow fly ball. This was a legitimate baseball decision. Jackson was not running hard, Martin was trying to send a message. Jackson responded by challenging him publicly in the dugout. He argued back. He confronted his manager in front of the whole team. Billy Martin had to be physically restrained from attacking Jackson on national television. Coaches literally had to hold Billy Martin back from fighting Jackson in front of millions of people watching at home. That is not normal. That is chaos. That is exactly how toxic Jackson made the environment. That is exactly how much he rubbed people the wrong way. Later in life, Jackson became a vocal critic of players linked to steroids and performance-enhancing drugs. He said Barry Bonds should not be in the Hall of Fame. He said Mark McGwire should not be in the Hall of Fame. But critics point out the hypocrisy. Jackson's era was rife with amphetamine use. Greenies were everywhere in the 1970s. Jackson was not innocent. He was a disruptive force who prioritized his own brand over the team. He had no moral authority to gatekeep the Hall of Fame. He was the exact thing he was criticizing. You also have to understand the economic and cultural context. Jackson was the first big free agency test case. The Yankees paid him massive money to be a savior and a superstar. Lots of cash. Huge contract. When he struck out, fans saw a waste of money. When he made an error, fans saw a waste of money. Every mistake seemed magnified because he was so expensive. He was a mercenary. He was not a son of the franchise like Ted Williams or Lou Gehrig. He was a gun for hire. And when the gun misfired with all those strikeouts and errors, the backlash was intense and harsh. People viewed him as overpaid and overrated. The money he was paid created unrealistic expectations. When he could not meet those expectations on a consistent basis, he became a lightning rod for criticism. He was also just flashy in a way that offended purists and traditional baseball fans. The gold chains, the violent swing, the look-at-me attitude, the constant need for attention and spotlight. The way he played the game seemed disrespectful to the older generation. To them, baseball was supposed to be pure and technical and understated. Jackson made it loud and theatrical. His strikeouts looked ugly to them. His errors looked careless and reckless. His celebration looked arrogant and selfish. The critique of him being trash is partly a cultural critique of how he played the game. It is not just about statistics. It is about philosophy. It is about the way he approached baseball as entertainment versus a sport. Now, here is where we get to the real answer. Here is where we get to why this matters. All of what we just said is true. Reggie Jackson had massive flaws. He struck out constantly. He could not field. He was inconsistent. He divided clubhouses. When you compare him to Ruth, Mays, Aaron, Williams, Gehrig, and Cobb, the comparison absolutely falls apart. He is not in their tier. He is not close to their tier. He is in a different tier entirely. That is just a fact. Those six are marble statues. Reggie Jackson is made of plaster. He is painted bright colors and looks flashy, but under scrutiny, he cracks. But here's the thing. Reggie Jackson still became a legend despite his flaws. He still became Mr. October. He still became one of the most famous names in baseball history. And that fact tells us something really important about how fame works in sports and in entertainment. Fame is not just about total value. Fame is not just about WAR or home run totals or batting averages. Fame is about moments. Fame is about memory. Fame is about the biggest stages. Reggie Jackson may have been a mediocre or below average player in the ALCS regular season games, but he was elite in the World Series. His team had to carry him to October, and then he showed up when it mattered most. Those World Series moments became the defining memories of his entire career. That is how he got famous. That is how he became Mr. October. That is how he earned his legend. It was not about total value. It was about peaking at exactly the right time on the biggest stage. Think about how many people watch the World Series versus how many watch the regular season or the ALCS games. Millions more watch the World Series. It is on every single network. It is the pinnacle of baseball competition. If you hit a home run in the World Series, millions of people see it. If you strike out in the ALCS, nobody remembers it. Jackson understood this intuitively well. He understood the power of the moment. He understood that baseball is not just a game. It is a story. It is entertainment. It is television. He played to the moment. He peaked when the cameras were hot. That is not a skill you can put in a statistics book. That is showmanship. That is performance. That is star power. And that is why he became famous despite his flaws. Because baseball, like all sports, is not just about the best players. It is not just about the most complete players. It is about the most memorable players. It is about the players whose names become synonymous with greatness in the public imagination. Michael Jordan was arguably not the most complete basketball player ever, but he was the most clutch. He was the most memorable. He performed on the biggest stage when it mattered most. The public memory is not fair or scientific. The public memory favors the dramatic. The public memory favors the moment that was watched by millions. Jackson understood that. He understood how television works. He understood that one dramatic World Series home run would be remembered forever by millions of people. He understood that 1,000 regular season strikeouts would be forgotten. He played to it. He leaned it into it. And it worked spectacularly well. That is his real genius, not his baseball skills. His understanding of fame and television and memory, and how the public constructs legends. So the real answer to why Reggie Jackson was called trash by critics is complicated. Yes, he was trash compared to the immortals. His statistics prove it. His flaws were real. But he was also brilliant at one thing. He was brilliant at creating memory. He was brilliant at performing. He was brilliant at becoming famous. He was a one-tool player, but that one tool was stardom. That one tool was the ability to make people remember him. That one tool was the ability to become a legend, despite not being as great as the legends. The complicated truth is this. Reggie Jackson belongs in the Hall of Fame for his impact on the game, but he does not belong at the table of the immortals. He is not Ruth. He is not Mays. He is not Aaron. He is not Williams. He is not Gehrig. He is not Cobb. He is a different kind of legend. He is a legend built on moments and memory and star power rather than complete excellence. He is a flawed legend. He is a controversial legend. He is a legend that people will debate forever, but he is still a legend. That is the paradox. That is the real story. The strikeouts were real. The poor defense was real. The clubhouse drama was real. The inconsistency was real. All of that stands. And yet he still became one of baseball's greatest names. That tells us that sometimes in sports and in life, being the best at everything is not what makes you legendary. Being the best at one crucial moment in front of the most people is what makes you legendary. Being able to perform when millions are watching. Being able to create a memory that lasts forever. That is its own kind of greatness. It is not the same as being a five-tool player. It is not the same as being a complete athlete, but it is real, and it matters. So yes, Reggie Jackson was flawed. Absolutely. When the critics said he was horrible compared to the actual immortals, they were right. The statistics back it up. The analysis backs it up. The scouting reports back it up. His career batting average of .262 is brutal. His 2,597 strikeouts are brutal. His 142 errors are brutal. His negative defensive value is brutal. All of it is brutal. He was not as good as Ruth. He was not as complete as Mays. He was not as consistent as Aaron. He was not as disciplined as Williams. He was not as durable as Gehrig. He was not as skilled at small ball as Cobb. He was worse than all of them in almost every measurable way. But he was better at one thing. He was better at becoming famous. He was better at creating moments that lasted. He was better at being on television and being remembered. He understood that in the modern era, in the 1970s baseball era, baseball was increasingly about entertainment and star power. The free agency era was changing the game. The media was changing the game. Personality was becoming as important as performance. Jackson understood this before almost anyone else. He leaned into it. He made himself famous. He made himself legendary. He made himself Mr. October. That is not nothing. That is actually a different kind of genius. The debate will go on forever. Is he overrated? Yes, absolutely. When compared to the actual immortals and complete players. Is he underrated? Perhaps when you consider his ability to perform under pressure and create legendary moments that defined an era. Is he in the Hall of Fame for the right reasons? Maybe not. His numbers do not justify his induction compared to other players. Is he still one of the most important figures in baseball history? Absolutely, without question. He changed how players could market themselves. He showed that you did not need to be the best player to become the most famous. You did not need to have the best statistics. You just needed to understand the moment and own it. You just needed to understand television and star power. That is a lesson that extends far beyond baseball and far beyond sports. That is a lesson about fame and power and attention and performance in the modern media-driven world. So what is the real verdict? Reggie Jackson was a flawed, one-dimensional, strikeout-prone, defensive liability of a player who does not belong in the conversation with the greatest baseball players of all time. When compared to the true immortals, he comes up woefully short every single time. His statistics prove it conclusively. His career batting average of .262 is an aberration among Hall of Famers. His strikeout record is still a mark of inefficiency rather than excellence. His defense was a net negative. His clubhouse presence was toxic. All of that is true and cannot be disputed. But he was also a legend. He was also Mr. October. He was also one of the most memorable baseball players in history. He belongs in the Hall of Fame. But he belongs in a different section than Ruth, Mays, Aaron, Williams, Gehrig, and Cobb. He belongs in the section for legends built on moments, rather than complete excellence. He belongs in the section for players who understood how to become famous. That is his true legacy. That is his real story. That is the complicated, messy, contradictory truth about Reggie Jackson. Now I want to hear from you. Do you think Mr. October is overrated? Do you think the criticism of Reggie Jackson is fair and justified? Do you think his World Series moments make up for his regular season inconsistency and his poor defense? Tell me in the comments below. Like this video if you want to see more deep dives into baseball history and baseball legends and the real stories behind the stats. Subscribe if you have not already, because we drop new videos all the time exploring baseball greatness. And if you really enjoyed this exploration of one of baseball's most controversial and fascinating figures, hit that notification bell so you never miss when we go live. Thanks for watching.